Hello and welcome back to Tinker Talks Guns. This time we're talking about a cartridge rather than a specific firearm, although we will be delving into a specific firearm or two in more detail. And that cartridge is the 38 that is not 38 Special, 38 Smith & Wesson. This was the first true modern centerfire cartridge introduced by Smith & Wesson in the 1870s. And it's part of the reason why your 38 is a 36. The original centerfire revolvers were cap and ball conversion revolvers, and a cap and ball 36 has a .375-inch bore for reasons best only known to Colonel Colt and others. So the first centerfire cartridges were made to fire out of .375-inch bores, and they used a heel-based .375-inch bullet in a .375-inch cartridge, where the walls, the outside diameter of the cartridge is actually .375. Well, this is not an ideal way to do things. You wind up with your lubrication groove outside of the cartridge casing, which gets messy. And Smith & Wesson realized this, so when they introduced their centerfire 38, which is a 36, they used a bullet that fit inside the .375-inch diameter case, which meant they used a bullet .360 inches in diameter. And this was loaded with a 147 grain round-nosed lead bullet over about 10 grains of black powder. And it would fire from the sorts of guns it was generally made for, which were smaller guns. Out of a 3¼ inch barrel, you'd get 700, 750 feet per second. And that's not awesome, but there was not exactly a standard for comparison available at the time. So, this cartridge was in use for a very long time, and even saw military service with the British, who loaded it with a 200 grain bullet, which came out of a full-size service revolver at around 650 feet per second, which was strange by modern standards. However, one British officer said, "The 38 is a fine man-stopper. Simply shoot them through the skull and they drop in their tracks." Hard to argue with that. The 38 Smith & Wesson was originally chambered in a single-action top-break revolver, which was quite revolutionary in its time because it ejected all 6 cartridges at once and exposed all 6 chambers to be loaded before you close the weapon again and were ready to fire. And this is much, much faster than a gate-loading revolver. These top-break revolvers quickly introduced double-action variants, such as this Smith & Wesson that we will talk more about. And this had the advantage of a double-action trigger, so you could fire very, very quickly on drawing it, and the auto-ejecting feature, where the ejector kicks all 5 cartridges out at the same time. And again, it's much quicker to reload than most of the gate-loading single actions at the time. The cartridge wound up being used by pretty much everyone, except Colt, who insisted on using 38 Colt and 38 Colt Short, and used the heel-based bullets long after everyone else had realized that they were suboptimal. Now, in modern terms, 38 Smith & Wesson was on its way out by the 1950s, and by the time I was a child in the 1960s, it was teetering on the ropes with only a couple of guns still made in it, and these were very inexpensive manually ejecting top breaks made by Harrington and Richardson and Ivor Johnson, and they were mediocre quality and very cheap, which was their saving grace. Now, you might think that such a cartridge would be anemic and kind of ineffective. Colonel Askins, a sort of renowned gunfighter of the pre-war period, was working in Mexico and was carrying a Smith & Wesson double-action top break revolver in 38 Smith & Wesson when they were charged by a man with a machete. And the colonel drew his 38 Smith & Wesson and fired 5 rounds into the fellow, who dropped at his feet. And this incident prompted Fitz at Colt, the famous Fitzwilliams at Colt, to present him with a custom 45 Colt snub-nosed revolver with the typical Fitz treatment, which we don't need to get into right now. And this is used as a illustration of how ineffective the 38 Smith & Wesson is, but does it? The thing is, he did drop the guy with 5 shots from a very small revolver against a committed attacker. And that's actually pretty impressive with any caliber. He was a renowned gunfighter for a reason. But what people always miss from that story is that, in fact, the 38 Smith & Wesson was not ineffective in that case. It actually worked. And there are better options. 38 Special is a better option. Certainly 9mm or 357 Magnum is a much better option. 45 ACP, the list is long and distinguished. But the fact remains that this was an effective cartridge and was in common use for the better part of 9 decades. And since I have shown off this little gun and this little cartridge, we're going to go to the tabletop where you can actually get a good look at them. So here we have the 38 Smith & Wesson in an approximation of its original loading. This is a factory load using a 147 grain round-nosed lead bullet. It's quite soft lead too. And from typical guns, it's going to come out between 650, 700, maybe 725 feet per second, depending on the gun. Not a powerhouse by any means, but it did have advantages in that it was fully self-contained, center fire, and didn't have a grotesque lube ring, gathering dust and garbage and generally being a nuisance. By 1900, they'd begun converting the caliber to fire smokeless powder. And since every gun was a black powder gun at that point, they loaded the smokeless loads to fire in the black powder guns, which, in guns of any quality at all, can be done quite safely to this day. I've put thousands of rounds of smokeless ammunition through what are often referred to as black powder guns made by Smith & Wesson, and have suffered no ill effects, even though these were significantly more potent than factory ammunition. This is what I load typically today and what I was firing in the video. This is a Rimrock Bullets 125 grain semi-wad cutter, loaded over enough unique to propel it from this gun's 1 5/8 inch barrel at 800 feet per second, making 178 foot-pounds of energy, which certainly puts it on par with 38 special loads like wad cutter target loads, which are often recommended for use in snub-nosed revolvers. That's really hotter than I'd want to shoot in anything but a Smith & Wesson, because Smith & Wessons were the cream of the crop when it came to top break 38 Smith & Wesson caliber revolvers. And in a solid frame gun like a Terrier or a Colt, where it was called 38 Colt New Police because they took 38 Smith & Wesson and put a flat-nosed bullet in it, and they were damned if they were going to write Smith & Wesson on their guns. So, there's the cartridge. Now, again, 38 Smith & Wesson was used not only in top breaks, but in fixed frame guns like the I-frame Smith & Wessons, the Colt Police Positive, and you can run a hotter load quite reasonably through those solid frame guns. But it has often been noted that the top break mechanism is somewhat weak by comparison. The British got around this with their 200 grain load by having a massively overbuilt gun. Hopefully we'll feature one of these Webleys at some point, chambered for 38-200. But as I said, they were massively overbuilt, as were the Enfields, which were also chambered in this caliber. Now, about this specific gun, let's unload and show clear. And this is not the gun that started my love affair with Smith & Wesson top brakes. In 2015, my shop burned down one fine July evening and took half the house with it. And it was a trying time. And shortly thereafter, my wife bought me a pair of Smith & Wesson top brakes from Pinto's Guns for the princely sum of $225 for the pair of them. And I was quite intrigued with them. Having little else to do at times because we were waiting for our house to be rebuilt, I did a lot of research on the internet, and in doing so, I came across the 2-inch barreled version, often called the bicycle model, which actually, specifically the bicycle model, was the 32 hammerless with a 2-inch barrel, but that name has bled over onto the 38 caliber guns as well. And I saw one that had been shortened quite a bit and fitted with a Pacmare grip. And I found that quite interesting. The proportions and everything looked really good to me. And so I proceeded to procure a double action safety hammerless and modify it to suit, which to me it looked right with a 1 5/8 inch barrel. And of course I installed a new front sight, in this case brass, so that it would show up well, and retained the incredibly small rear sight. These really were meant to be used at an arm's length, and so sights were very much a secondary consideration. And then I constructed a variety of different custom ergonomic grips for it, because I found the grip a little small with my gigantic hands, and settled on this pair, which is in desert ironwood. And they're very comfortable and work very well. And the interesting thing about these old guns is the trigger pulls. They're very, very good. They're not light, but they're extremely smooth and not very long. I mean, this is a pretty short double action trigger pull. And I found that I could shoot this gun really shockingly well, which you would not expect with a tiny rear sight and an incredibly short sight radius. The thing about that is the sight radius is so short that both the front and rear sight are in the same focal plane. And so you can be focused on both the front and rear sight simultaneously, which has allowed me to do absurd things like shoot 4-inch groups at 25 yards offhand with this thing. And I came to like it. And now, when I built this gun, when I put it together, it was never meant to be anything but a curiosity. Just because I liked the look of it and I thought it would be fun to shoot, and indeed it was. But I liked it so much and shot it so well that I wound up carrying it around in a pocket holster around the shop and house and property. Just because it was so small and so easy and so convenient to do so. This is, in fact, noticeably smaller than a J-frame Smith & Wesson snub-nose revolver, the quintessential snubby. And I just found it very convenient, and I could shoot it well enough that I really was quite confident that it would serve my needs, at least around the house and yard. And I wound up shooting it rather a lot. I started out, this is actually the caliber that got me started reloading, because the factory ammo is crap, and it's very, very expensive, and you walk into a gun shop and ask for it, your average gun shop, they'd look at you funny. So I started reloading, and initially I used a 148 grain hollow base wad cutter, because then the 356 caliber wad cutter base would expand to fill the .361 rifling of the Smith & Wesson. And I should mention that, I don't know that I have. Unlike other modern 38s, these are not .357-inch bullets. They are nominal .361 to .362. So this is, again, not a 38, it's a 36, but 38 had name recognition and was good for marketing. So, 38 it is, and 38 it and its ilk have been ever since. And the Smith & Wesson has a grip safety, which barely moves. They often call it the magic grip safety because it doesn't seem that it could possibly be moving enough to actually deactivate the gun. But it very effectively does, and just very little gripping it allows you to pull the trigger. So, however it works, it works. Now, a lot of the copies of Smith & Wesson, because practically every top-break Smith & revolver made in the 19th century was a knockoff of the Smith & Wesson in one way or another, although often of simplified construction. This is a very typical gun of its type. And this one has been refinished, but it would have been available from the factory in this finish with the mother of pearl grips. I don't know who refinished it. I found it in this condition and bought it because, gosh, it's just so pretty. And even this, a Harrington & Richardson, which is a cheap gun, compared to the Smith & Wessons at least, still has a very lovely trigger pull. It is different in mechanical details. For example, there's no side plate, so everything has to be fished in and out the bottom of the revolver. And there's a very inconvenient spring located up here to return the trigger. But this is very typical of top-break revolvers because it has the standard 3 1/4 inch barrel, the standard sort of sight, standard sort of trigger, and it's about as simple as you can get it, with the concealed hammer, double action only. And this is it's a cheap gun, but this is a very handsome example, and I do like it quite a bit. Although I don't fire it as much because it just doesn't work for me the way the Smith & Wesson does. Now, I am not the first person by any means to bob the barrel on a top-break revolver. This Ivor Johnson 3rd model was bobbed at some point in the undefined past. We have no idea when. And I don't know, it's very pugnacious looking, I think. It just appeals to me. And once again, the trigger pull is heavy, but extremely smooth. And it's quite a little thing. Now, top breaks fell off the scene because making them in a significantly better caliber involved making them so big and robust, that they were actually kind of bigger and heavier than a by then point standard solid frame revolver with a swing out cylinder. And contrary to what you might expect, even though this gun will use Smith & Wesson J-frame speed loaders from HKS, it is not faster to reload than a J-frame 38 with speed loaders, because you can't just pop the gun open and have all the shells fly out. Because inevitably, if you do this, one of the cartridges will slip underneath the extractor star and the ejector and jam it in a slightly raised position so that you now have a paperweight. The gun is then out of the fight. So to reload these, you have to turn it upside down while ejecting the cartridges. And then, use the speed loader. And I've tried. It's just not faster than a much more robust solid frame revolver. So they're weaker, mechanically more complicated, and they just don't offer any real advantage over a modern style. And I say modern because we're from 1890 38 on. Um, a modern style, they just don't offer any advantages over a modern style solid frame revolver, and they offer several disadvantages, as outlined. So, the 38 Smith & Wesson. If you want to shoot guns in 38 Smith & Wesson, I highly recommend it. They're a lot of fun if you reload your own ammunition, because again, the factory ammo is crap, expensive, and hard to find. And I have come up with a number of what I call antique-friendly loads using this bullet, where they poop it out about 650 feet per second. So it's actually moving slower than the significantly heavier factory bullet. And even my most frail 38 specials have not had any issue with that load. So, this, by the way, because someone's going to ask, is a Smith & Wesson double-action safety hammerless 4th model. And this particular gun was made around 1909. And it was not in this good of shape when I got a hold of it. But it's become one of my favorite snub-nosed revolvers. And, you know, I still carry it when discretion is necessary and the perceived threat is low. And I'm quite confident in my ability to use it as a civilian self-defense weapon. So, in 2022, the 38 Smith & Wesson is pretty much a dead issue. For many, many years, ammunition companies would run off small lots of it and sell them at a premium price. And these days, with shortages of ammunition components, I don't think anyone is, and I don't think they're all that likely to resume production once things loosen up, presuming they ever do. So if you don't reload, you're going to be hard pressed and probably shortly out of luck trying to locate this ammunition. Starline still makes brass. It takes standard small pistol primers. You can use .357 lead bullets in it, particularly cowboy bullets, which tend to be softer because they're supposed to splatter nicely on steel. But before the pandemic, 38 Smith & Wesson was an obsolete cartridge on its way out. Now, it's probably a dead cartridge. The guns are plentiful, mostly inexpensive. They're fun to shoot, and if you reload, why not? But while it is technically viable for self-defense in skilled hands, don't, because there are so many options that are so much better now, ranging from 38 special snub-nosed revolvers to subcompact 9mm that hold at least twice as many shots. There's just no conceivable reason to resurrect the 38 Smith & Wesson. So, in commercial terms, I think we're going to be bidding it a fond farewell. I'm going to keep loading it, and I'm going to keep shooting the guns because it amuses me to do so, and it's fun. And I really, really like this little gun. But that's about it for this time. Do remember to hit like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. Yes, it really does. And commenting helps also, if you feel so moved. And if you're really impressed, you could click the link below in the description and support me on Patreon, because, of course, all of this costs money. And I'll do it anyway, but it's nice to have some help. So I hope that you are safe and well. Stay safe, take care, and we'll talk to you again real soon.